And welcome back, everybody, to the Tech Summit podcast. Again, not officially named, but I think we'll all live with that fact. With that said, tonight we actually have, not exactly too many topics to touch on, but a very important one nonetheless. One that has been gracing the comment section of every Oculus review that I have posted as of late, and it's the fact that you pretty much are required to use a Facebook account with your Oculus Quest, Rift S, or any of the above. Specifically with the Quest 2, at this time, I actually have it right here. And I've been testing it for the past week or so. I think it has been a pretty fantastic piece of gear, and I think that it plays games incredibly well. However, there's one giant issue with it, and while I haven't personally experienced it, is that since you do have to link your Facebook account with it in order to be able to use one, well, one, you do need to make a Facebook account if you don't already have one, though. That is unlikely. If you were born sometime within the last 20 years, then you probably definitely made one. There have been a lot of bannings, actually, in the community for people that have bought an Oculus Quest 2. Not really that it bans them from technically, at least purposefully, using their Oculus Quest 2, but more so that they get banned from Facebook in general, meaning that they also can't use the Oculus Quest 2 in general because they're just tied that much. There's just that big of a tie between the two,
So,
which is a pretty big issue.
so basically, this has been making the rounds a lot on the internet. Specifically, Oculus's subreddit has more or less gone into a sort of binary posting method. Like, either they're talking about how they haven't gotten their Quest 2 yet in the mail, or they're talking about how they got banned from Facebook and basically bought a paperweight. Um, the specific message tends to regard the Facebook account as disabled, and because of the requirements for the Quest 2 to specifically have a Facebook login in order to use it, it's basically essentially making the Quest unplayable for a lot of people. And there's a lot of problems that come with this, and a lot of very negative implications going forward. Namely, that for a lot of people, when they see that their Facebook account is disabled, it specifically tells them that the case has already been reviewed and that it cannot be reversed, giving them no real outlet to talk to Facebook about it. They can, in fact, contact Oculus support, and we'll get to that in a moment. But through Facebook itself, it's more or less a done deal. The account is banned. That's it. And of course, the additional thing is that, okay, so, some people may defend this by saying that it is just for the Quest 2 and that if you still have a Rift or a Rift S, you can still use the Oculus device perfectly fine. But Facebook has already come out and said that you will require a Facebook account going forward in the year, by the year 2023. Any new customers have to get that Facebook account put in there no matter what. And those who are currently already grandfathered in with the Oculus account will have to shift over by the end of 2023. That can have a lot of really dangerous implications because, should your Facebook account be disabled for whatever reason, like say, for example, they think that you're a duplicate account or a fake account, that could just be the end because Facebook has a lot of accounts, but not everyone has a Facebook or not everyone uses it. Like I have a Facebook by
Right.
formality. I don't use my Facebook account.
Same.
The only reason why I have it is so that I could keep in contact with a couple of people from my old college. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people out there who would make a Facebook account only for the Oculus Quest 2.
Yeah.
So, if they make the account just for that and then they never post on it, Facebook can easily assume that that's a fake account and just disable it without warning. And now the Quest 2 is completely unusable. So there's a lot of discussion going on about, if this is an ethical choice, after all this time, is it really okay to, put the entirety of this product that you paid for in the hands of essentially what are bots? Because I don't think, there's people manually disabling these Facebook accounts. It's usually going to be the matter of an AI that's doing that.
Right. I do think that this is just a mistake on someone's end, on Facebook's end in particular, I think, because Oculus seems to be the only ones that are actually trying to do anything about this in the first place. I mean, if you look around, if you go on Oculus's Twitter, you will find a post actually that says that if anybody if you're one of the few that is experiencing at this issue where you're being banned and that you can't use your Oculus Quest 2 because you're being banned off of Facebook for some random reason, then that you can contact them directly, even if you do get a message saying that they've reviewed the circumstances and that the ban is irreversible. Supposedly, if you do contact Oculus customer support, they should be able to help you out with that. But there are still a lot of mixed messages in that regard because you have Facebook saying here, no, your account is permanently banned, even though it does seem to be a decision made more so by bots than anything else. And I definitely agree with you on that one. I do hope that this is something that does get resolved relatively soon because, I mean, a lot of people are claiming the Oculus Quest 2 to be a $300 to $400 paperweight. I mean, depending on how much storage you decided that you wanted to pay for. I went with the $300 model here, which is the 64 gig version, which I actually happen to think that it's plenty of storage for the kinds of games that are currently available on the store. So I really don't think that you have to pay the extra buck. And if you're going to pay the extra buck, then you probably might as well already get a Rift S because you do get much higher quality gameplay out of that per se. But anyway, I did get a little bit off topic there, but the whole point is that a lot of people are claiming this to be a paperweight because they're getting banned off of Facebook, which essentially means that they're getting banned from using their own product that they paid $300 to $400 for, and that is a pretty massive issue. Luckily, that hasn't happened to me, but if that had happened to me, I would be pretty livid right now as we speak.
Yeah, and you can't really blame people who do end up getting very angry about this. You're talking about an investment of several $100s. The Quest 2 is, in fact, probably probably the cheapest VR option out there outside of, the mobile ones like your Gear VR or your Cardboard, which they don't really make either anymore now, do they?
And the original Quest, I think, which I still think is being made. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, like I remember that when the original Quest came out, that was only $200.
Yeah, so even then, so yeah, the Quest 2 is still one of the cheapest options on the market, significantly cheaper than a Vive or a Valve Index, especially. So, a lot of people are going to want to turn to this as their sort of introduction into VR. I was interested in the possibility of doing that myself. And then you find out that Facebook is required in order to use the device, which in and of itself can be a turnoff for a lot of people who are concerned about the privacy issues about Facebook, because Facebook does not have clean hands. They've gotten into a lot of trouble over the last few years for a variety of issues, most of them regarding privacy and, the data that is often, shared among other people, without much permission at all. Um, so from the get-go, people are already kind of turned off by the fact that Facebook accounts are required. But now you're talking about people who actually do take the plunge anyway. They do sign up for Facebook or they put their Facebook account in there only to find out that their Facebook account has been deactivated and they cannot use the device that they paid for. Um, I don't see how Facebook can really win out in this particular instance. They're turning away potential customers who don't want to have that social media integration, and they're immediately turning off their already existing user base who ends up getting caught up in the crossfire of this weird attempt from Facebook to clean up their image in, the current circumstances because of all the controversy they've been running into lately.
Yeah, and I mean, it has been a lot of controversies, like so much so that Facebook has even been taken to court over this, and questioned by the Supreme Court in general. And it's not a good look. And I definitely see why Facebook would want to fix their image. This clearly was not the solution for trying to fix their image of anything. And I think that the whole purpose of this, rather than for them to clean their image, was probably just to get more people on board with using Facebook in general. Because less people that were already using Facebook before most likely left due to all of these controversies. They ended up forcefully having to come back if they wanted to use an Oculus Quest 2. And I think that that's more so what they were going for here, but that's, again, just an opinion.
I think part of the problem here is that when Facebook bought Oculus all those years ago, you had people concerned about the possibility of requiring a Facebook account for the use of an Oculus device. And Facebook, as well as the founder of Oculus, came out and said that that would not be a requirement. You do not need a Facebook account in order to use an Oculus device. Um, of course, you can argue at this point that they chose their words very wisely in that they were using present tense, more or less leaving the door open for them to be able to do it in the future and then, you know, sort of, work around that. But in the end, they sort of try to quell the concerned user base and other potential customers by saying that Facebook would not be required. And now it is required in order to use a Quest 2. It will be required to use other Oculus devices in the near future. And a lot of people are finding themselves unable to use these devices because their Facebook accounts are the ones that get disabled. You know, is it ethically, sound to essentially brick somebody's device over, the deletion of a Facebook account, whether it be because they are seen as a possible duplicate account, or if they said something that violated Facebook's terms of service. Don't get me wrong. If you violate Facebook's terms of services, then Facebook has every right to remove your account. That's because they're a private entity and they have the right to do that. The problem comes down when you end up also removing the rights for them to use a physical product, not software, a physical product that they paid for. You know, if you get banned from PlayStation Network, you're banned from PlayStation Network, but they don't brick your PlayStation 4 as a result of that. You
Yeah,
can still play your games offline, the games that you paid for on the system that you paid for.
exactly.
Facebook, on the other hand, is going the opposite direction about it. And so something that I was wondering, because I have not used an Oculus device in the past, and I want
Mhm.
your input on this as someone who has and who has recently done a first impressions video on the Quest 2. Um, if you use an Oculus device and you link up your Oculus account or now your Facebook account to it, and you want to sell that device later on, is there a way to unlink that Facebook account, or is that device permanently linked to your Facebook?
I don't believe that it is permanently linked. I think that with just a quick factory reset, that you should be able to resell it, and that person should still be able to link their account either way. I think it would be more foolish of them actually to not allow you to do that because, I mean, if anything, it just it alienates the used market, like the people who wouldn't have bought it brand new anyway. If they kept you from being able to do that, then I mean, it would just cause yet another scandal. Like they would definitely stay on people's bad side for even longer than they already have for quite some time. So while I haven't tried to erase any of the data on my Oculus Quest and give it to somebody else for them to try to put in their Facebook credentials, I don't think that that's something that they do. And with that said, this is not me wanting to give them any ideas along the way.
I
Ju-
mean, I definitely think it's an idea that they would come up with no matter what. I mean,
Probably.
so you mentioned alienating the used market, but in the end, Facebook wouldn't see a single cent from that used market until they start purchasing software necessarily. And of course, while that is very much a reason why you should not want to alienate that used market, tech companies are not beyond that. Like we've seen it in video games multiple times where like
Hmm.
Microsoft tried to sort of stomp out the used game market by not allowing used games to be played on the Xbox One. They backtracked on that after all the backlash, but
Yeah.
that sort of, the attitude is present, and it's entirely possible that with what Oculus is doing here with the Facebook requirements and the banning of the account, stuff like that, that a precedent could also be set for bricking the device and possibly just preventing it to be resold. It's just they took your money and that's just kind of it.
I would kind of argue against that, and that is because, I mean, as we were actually talking about this off screen, it's that when it comes to any kind of Facebook account, the reason why Facebook is free to everybody is because you are the product. And as long as you can link your Facebook account to them, or to your Oculus headset, and then you're still feeding them data to some capacity. So I think that it is still beneficial to them to keep that market open, the used market open, because you are still giving them data that they're taking advantage of, or that they ultimately could take advantage of if they wanted to.
So the fact that you mentioned that particular point is something that I kind of wanted to be able to nicely segue into a bit of a question that I have for you.
Sure.
And that really just comes down to the ethical questions about these things. Because, like you mentioned, Facebook has always been free and allegedly always will be. But the point has always been that Facebook is not the product. The person using it is the product because your data is collected and then they sell that data later on.
Right.
Um, but now we're running into a situation where it's not just that you are the product that Facebook is, buying basically, but now you are the customer and you are purchasing a product from Facebook. So you have that sort of weird dynamic where you are giving them your data, but at the same time, you are still purchasing something from them. So, like, can Facebook continue this sort of philosophy of, the customer is the product when they are now actually purchasing something from them?
I have heard arguments actually for the defense of them keeping Facebook free and selling you in exchange a very cheap VR headset, because I'm sure that these headsets are not cheap to make by any means. And if anything, they're probably either making very little money off of the Oculus Quest 2, or they're losing money or just breaking even barely. If we're only looking at the hardware side and just selling that kind of hardware. So I think that they are still making money off of us either way through our accounts and putting advertisements on them that are specifically catered to you. And I think that that's actually how they get to keep the prices down for this kind of product because they force you to link your Facebook account to them. It's kind of how Apple might, at the very least, over the last couple of years, how they might not make you spend thousands of dollars on the phone, and instead they'll sell you like the budget version of a phone, like let's say something like
The SE.
like the SE or even the iPhone 12 mini or the iPhone 12 or something like that, where they still have most of the features that the iPhone 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max would have. However, the way that they get to compensate for any kind of losses when it comes to maybe underselling their products is by selling you on accessories, like not including a charging brick in the box, for instance, and
I
making you
was
buy that
just
separately.
about to mention that. It's like we're talking about Apple here, but that's a whole new can of worms about how they don't want to sell you the charging brick. And, they sort of wrap it up in this nice little guise of, protecting the environment, but
Hmm.
they're still selling it to you separately and you have to buy it. So,
Exactly.
Apple is its own can of worms when it comes to that. It's like, does it really cost that much to produce an iPhone? It probably can't cost more than maybe $200-$300 per unit.
I don't
Should
think
it?
I don't think that they're taking that big of a loss on their phones.
Like they're definitely profiting off the phone, and then they're just opting to profit off even more.
Yeah. The issue might, if anything, be just that now it's more expensive than before to make these phones. And that's probably why they're resorting now to the sales of accessories more so than anything, like things like removing the headphone jack so that they can save money on including a headphone jack and instead try to sell you on AirPods.
I don't think it's even really a matter of saving money over the increasing costs. I think it really just comes down to
Making more profit.
yeah, they've proven that they can get away with it with that headphone jack thing. So it's like let's just take it a step further. A lot. You creep these things up little by little, and after a while, people sort of become a little bit numb to it. So that way, people have expected to not have a headphone jack now, and
Hmm.
if a phone has a headphone jack, it's this weird novelty thing.
He just feels old.
Give it a couple of years, and soon it's going to be this weird novelty thing to include a charging brick, or to go to Apple's other branch of technology, it's going to be this weird novelty thing to include a stand for the display monitor that you're purchasing. Lest we forget how much they charge for that display monitor. And
Mhm.
they tried to pass along with it by saying oh, it's just a special magnet. But in the end, you're still paying, what was it, almost $1,000
It was $1,000 for that standalone, and
plus tax.
yes, and the monitor itself was $5,000.
And they get away with that because there's sort of this weird conditioning. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a whole separate issue for an entirely different episode. How Apple can sort of get away with these things because of this weird um, fear of missing out,
Mm-hmm.
or this sort of like conditioning where like a lot of people like, because the thing is, especially specifically Mac computers or MacBooks are often bought and used by a lot of artists or professionals and stuff like that. And it seems less to be a thing about, oh, this device is genuinely better for artistic things, and more just this sort of feeling of like, a status symbol where you feel like more of a professional if you are using a MacBook. If you're talking to a client, they will take you more seriously if you are seen with a MacBook. And that's a whole other can of worms for
Yeah.
another time. But, there is that sort of feeling like, so because they see that sort of social stigma and that sort of social pressure of having these products, that they can get away with things like charging for the stand separately, or charging for the brick separately.
I mean,
And
they actually went as far in the past, and I don't know if you know about this or not, but and when they were selling the brand new cheese grill Mac Pro, uh, they
is
actually
is
tried to
the
sell.
is the $25,000 one? Or?
I think so, yeah. It's just like like the fully a customizable version of the Mac Pro,
Right.
like not the trash can one, and the one that came out last year. So for that one, they actually came out with an accessory, and it was just wheels, like just to make the ability of moving the Mac Pro around a lot easier.
Okay.
And they actually cost a couple $100, I think,
Couple $100 for some wheels.
for some wheels. So Apple has done this time and time again, where when it comes to their engineering, where Apple spends most of their money on, besides marketing, of course, as I'm sure that building their chips is not that expensive. Soliciting RAM is not that expensive, I'm sure,
Right.
and buying and their displays off of Samsung, I'm sure by now, especially since it's done in bulk and since they've been doing it for such a long time, it's become a lot cheaper.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really think at the end, when it comes to Apple, it really just comes down to just maximizing profits because they know they can get away with it. It's a slippery slope kind of thing. We see it all the time in tech products. We've seen it in video games themselves.
Mhm.
You can also kind of see it in other forms of media, and you just sort of slowly condition the audience into sort of expecting it. And then by the time you realize you sort of look back at the last 10 years and think, wow, remember when this was a thing that was included without extra cost?
Back in
Um,
my day,
yeah,
we used to
remember
get
the
charging
old
bricks.
yeah, remember the old days where you plugged in headphones? Imagine that.
Yeah, like you see this thing, this audio interface is it's super ancient because it doesn't operate over Bluetooth headphones
Exactly.
or anything like that. I
You know,
can't use my AirPods with it, therefore, like this thing is trash in comparison.
yeah, and there is that conditioning, and same thing. You can also condition in other ways. Like, say for example, after a while, you start to in a couple of years, we could probably be thinking, remember when you didn't need a Facebook account for your Oculus device? Transition back,
Yeah,
transition
transitioning
back,
back.
transitioning back. Like I don't know. I just feel like it's a very morally repugnant act to require a social media account. Like to
Mhm.
knowing how. Don't get me wrong. Social media in general is something that I personally am not a huge fan of, but Facebook in particular seems to come under fire significantly more than other social media platforms like Twitter, like Reddit, like Facebook's own Instagram. It's
Mhm.
specifically Facebook that tends to get into all of this trouble. And now they are requiring you to have that Facebook account, to give up your privacy in order to use this device that you paid for to use, presumably in the comfort of your own house.
Of course.
Presumably, I mean, I guess you technically can use it outdoors, but would you really want to?
Would you even be able to actually, to an extent? I would wonder. I mean, I haven't tried using this in a place where there isn't an internet connection, so I actually don't know if you always have to be connected to Facebook or if it needs to first authenticate itself with Facebook before you can use it at all.
I'm just picturing someone like using an Oculus inside a McDonald's for the free Wi-Fi. Is it like they're just sort of wrecking havoc inside a McDonald's? They bump into the counter, maybe accidentally smack like the person behind the counter because you
Like
just
the
need
cashier.
they're trying to punch somebody in super hot. I actually experienced that one firsthand a couple of days ago when I was actually demoing the Quest 2, which we can agree though that the Quest 2 on a hardware level is like this astounding piece of tech, right?
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
Like the problems with the Quest 2 come down entirely on the requirements of a Facebook account being necessary.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess there's also technically some possible display issues. You can sort of run into that sort of little weird like screen door effect with
Mm-hmm.
the display, which the Reverb 2 from HP is going to try and fix that with a much better display for a more affordable price too. It's like $600 versus, say, for example, a Valve Index is 1,000.
Right, right.
But so it's an amazing piece of tech, and so you can want to use that. But
Mm-hmm.
this sort of Facebook requirement sort of gates a lot of people off from wanting to do it just because they are reasonably concerned about their privacy. It's not even a paranoia type of thing. It has been proven that Facebook does not like regard your privacy in a particularly positive ways.
Yeah. It's definitely true that they don't care at all. And I mean, regarding that, ultimately, to them, it doesn't really matter too much because, I mean, like for one, it seems like most of that responsibility has fallen under Oculus because you are buying the product from the Oculus division first and foremost. It just so happens that they're owned by Facebook, so this is a requirement for you to be able to use the Oculus Quest 2, not just to the fullest, but to be able to use it at all. And I think that um, either way, the Oculus Quest 2 has become the best entry level VR headset that we have ever seen. Beyond, I think even just a Quest. I actually don't remember whether or not the regular Quest was capable of being used with a PC or not, but you can use the Oculus Quest 2 with your PC, and all that it requires is just that USB-C port that's going to be right on the side of it, or on the right side, and you can plug in pretty much any cheap USB-C cable to it, and you can play your PC VR games on it. So like you're not just limited to your mobile games that would be an Oculus Quest store because there are going to be two very different stores. On the PC version, you're going to get other games as well. You're going to gain access to Steam VR, which is something that you don't get uh, if you have the Quest 2 completely untethered. But if you do have it tethered to your PC, then it pretty much replaces your Oculus Rift and your Oculus Rift S. It's just that you would be playing these games at a lower resolution in general, and that's pretty much the only compromise I can think of. And the only thing that I have noticed actually based from my first impressions video and my full review of this product, like that's pretty much the only compromise that I could come up with. On the untethered side, you do have that issue with having to use this with a Facebook account. So even if you didn't have a Facebook account, now you have to make one anyway.
And then you just sort of run into the possibility of being seen as a fake account and immediately getting disabled.
What do the bots in the first place even do in order to consider you a fake account, a bot account, in order to mistake you for a bot account to begin with? I wonder what criteria they have to follow in order for that to be an issue, in order for that to even.
I mean, I think at that point you're just sort of running into the same issue that you would have, like, say, for example, YouTube's algorithms and how like YouTube often tends to like content strike people or take down videos or accounts or whatever without much notice. You're running into that sort of same problem where it's just like no matter how you slice or dice it, if it's a bot or an AI that is doing this sort of moderation as opposed to an actual human being, you're always going to run into these weird, stringent issues, these weird rules that is unexplainable by just about anybody.
Mhm.
The best I can think of is that Facebook would want to probably flag the account if the account has been made from the get go and just never posts anything. I don't know if maybe
Ooh.
that could be so. Again, so we're talking about somebody who doesn't have a Facebook account and then makes one just so they can use the Quest 2.
Mm-hmm.
Just by the simple act of making an account to fulfill a requirement and not wanting to use that account, it's entirely possible that Facebook can decide, okay, that's a fake account, that's a bot. We're going to disable that account and we're not going to allow you to review it. Oculus's support is in fact a avenue that a lot of people can go down, but you've already seen Reddit posts on r/Oculus where they talk with them and the support team still just tells them, there's nothing you can do about it. The account has been reviewed. The account will not be brought back. That's it. Have a nice day. Is there anything else we can help you with? And at that point, it really is a paperweight. There's not really anything the person can do about it except maybe resell it if the account doesn't stay linked to it or not. Maybe resell it and then spend extra money on another VR headset that won't have that kind of requirement to it.
Well, yeah, essentially, just having to save up for a more expensive headset. And I don't just mean an Oculus headset to begin with, because, like you said, eventually that requirement will come to all Oculus headsets where you do have to have a Facebook account linked to them
By 2023.
by 2023.
And
so
of course,
within the next 3 years or so.
And of course, all new customers. So like if you buy a Rift right now, you would still be implored very much to sign up for a Facebook account.
Yeah.
So, it's like no matter what, if you buy an Oculus device, you're going to be railroaded into tying your Facebook account to it, whether it be now or later. And, for people who don't trust Facebook, who don't like to use Facebook, who don't want a Facebook, the question does ask itself sort of like, where do you go from there?
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, so let's ignore value because no matter what, you're paying more for a VR device at this point. But, for someone who doesn't want to use Facebook or attach a Facebook to their VR device, so say, for example, myself, what VR headset could you really recommend at that point? For someone who wants to be at least a little bit budget conscious, but cannot go the Oculus route because of these issues.
Well, had this been a question last year, I would have said something like PSVR, but that's something that even Sony has admitted that they're not planning on carrying over to the PlayStation 5.
And even when you were there, you would just constantly be locked into the PlayStation ecosystem.
Yeah, that is true.
You can't use the PSVR on a PC.
Right.
You can't use Steam VR with it.
Exactly. So ultimately, that part would only matter if you are a PlayStation 4 user already, and if you wanted to play only those PlayStation 4 games. So beyond that, there is the HTC Vive that doesn't have that kind of requirement. I think that the HTC Vive is actually owned more so by Microsoft, if I'm not mistaken. I could be entirely wrong about that. There is just a lot more freedom when it comes to the Vive, which is still going to be more expensive than the Oculus Rift. We are talking about $600 roughly at MSRP.
Right.
We really don't have that many options right now.
So
There is the Valve Index, but that's $1,000. That is very inaccessible to a lot of people. I would rather buy a graphics card over an Index. Personally, that costs $1,000 over the Index itself, because the Index is going to require you to have good hardware anyway in order for it to actually be useful.
So you mentioned $600 for the Vive as well. And that's where I just wanted to sort of backtrack to what I mentioned before. The HP Reverb 2 is also going to be $600. Do you think that could possibly be a really good competitor to the Vive at the same price point?
If the marketing is there, then yes, I think that they could bring some pressure over. But the marketing has to be there, and HP does not do too well when it comes to marketing.
Yeah, what about like the actual specs and the hardware side of things? Like from what we can understand so far, because obviously the Vive isn't out yet. I think only a handful of people have gotten the Vive. Excuse me, the Reverb hasn't been out yet. I think only a handful of people have gotten their hands on one. So first impressions are very limited at the current moment. But going off of what we can understand and what we know of the specs, do you think the Reverb can really compete with the Vive and possibly take from that audience and
Yes.
bring new people over?
Yes. I do think so. I do believe in HP's capabilities of actually making a decent headset to begin with, and I think that it is just a matter, I guess, of going into Steam and Valve saying, "Okay, we officially do support this headset," and you would be able to play games like Hellblade VR, Super Hot, which can actually be bought on Steam as well, and Skyrim VR, Doom VR, and things like that. Even though I don't recommend Doom VR at all.
This is the first that I've heard of Hellblade having a VR.
Oh,
Well,
it
let me just
does.
read that.
Like it's not actually a first-person experience, which I don't know if it's more like an on-purpose thing or if it's just like a lazy thing. Because I mean, I don't know exactly how much you know about VR. Well, not VR, but Hellblade story in general. The game in VR is still played in third person,
Yeah.
uh, which to an extent does make sense narratively. But when it comes to the VR experience, you're not really playing as Senua, but rather kind of a subconscious of her
Right.
that is just controlling her. And the game is still technically, at least it still feels like a 2D experience, or more like a 2.5D experience, I guess. I mean, I'm not sure if you would call VR a 4D experience
I mean,
overall, but like
do you
it's
do
not the
you
full.
mean on rails? Like you're being railroaded from different place to place? Like,
Uh,
is that what you mean?
yeah, sort of,
So
sort of.
kind of like those movie theater arcade games with the guns and stuff like that. The on rail shooters or your House of the Dead's. Where
Oh, well,
it's
not
like,
quite, not quite,
no,
actually. No, no. Like you're still playing Hellblade normally. It's just that the whole environment, like you're kind of like sitting in the middle, I would say, and Sinua is like right in front of you, and you're controlling her that way.
okay.
It's kind of like you're just telling her what to do versus you actually just playing a Senua. You're kind of just watching Senua do her thing, but the environment isn't 360.
So I was also wondering because you very quickly made a snide comment towards Doom VR. By all means, what exactly is wrong with it?
The issue with Doom VR is just that it depends too much on you actually using your controllers to teleport around instead
Okay.
of running about. Like it's not at all the same thing as playing actual Doom.
Right.
Playing actual Doom is a lot of fun because you're playing in first person, you're running around,
So
you're like kicking things, you're punching
So
demons in
basically,
the
what you're
face.
saying is that Doom VR very much sort of interrupts the flow of the game by having you teleport as opposed to just sort of run around. Because Doom is a very fast-paced game,
Yes, it
and
slows
so
everything down a lot.
it doesn't even sound like it's slowing. It's more like a roller coaster that just keeps jerking itself to stop on a dime and then continues again because of teleportation.
Yeah, right.
Um,
And there's another game that it kind of reminds me of, and that is actually Unspoken, which is it is an Oculus game where you play as like some kind of sorcerer or magician that brings up a sword that where you use, I guess, mana, like we can and just call the magic system that, and you can bring up like fireballs or out of your other hand and that kind of thing.
mhm.
And in that game, you don't just walk around, like you don't use your joysticks to walk around. Instead, you would just like teleport from place to place. But that game was designed to be played that way. Doom was not designed to play that way. So Doom VR feels completely different than actual Doom, and it's just not really an experience that I would recommend. So not every game would translate that well into VR, which is completely understandable. But a game that pretty much had to be rebuilt to be playable in VR, at the very least, you even sold separately so that you can actually play it in VR. It's just a completely different experience that I wouldn't really recommend. It is actually rather uncomfortable, if anything, to play Doom VR, in my opinion.
So what you're basically saying is play Half-Life Alyx instead, because it was built from the ground up for VR.
Yeah. I mean, if that's the case, then yes, absolutely. Though I've never played Alex before or Alex. I'm not exactly
It's
sure.
Alex.
Oh, it's Alex. Okay. I have not played Alex yet. I do intend to. I mean, I do have a VR headset. I might as well, since it is one of the biggest VR games ever. I might as well play it.
I know that they have multiple paths or multiple ways that you can actually move around in the game. Like there is the teleportation option, but they do give you the option to actually be able to walk and move with a control stick and stuff like that. Like
And that's most likely what I would do. Though I would probably want to play that game just in a more open space.
I definitely think you would need a more open space for Alex.
Yeah. Or they could
Not
also.
this space.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not the space that we're recording in here. No.
Right.
Speaking for myself, playing Super Hot VR on the Quest 2 in here, there is one particular ridge, like right up here, where, you can bump your head really badly if you are, vertically gifted to a degree. And there are multiple instances where I smashed my fists on here when you're trying to like punch an enemy. Couple of times where I've sort of tried to back away and bumped my head on something just because the roof ridges downwards. Um, that just comes back down to the whole, making sure that you have an appropriate amount of space for any kind of VR. Whether it requires external sensors or not, which we know the Quest 2 doesn't.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean you can be able to play it in a storage closet and do just fine. You're gonna
Right.
have a really bad time with that.
Yeah, which I guess I would say that if I would add one feature, uh, besides remove that requirement to have you use, uh, well, to make you use a Facebook account with us or any kind of
I was
social
gonna
media
say
account
like
with
that has
us.
to be the top priority to fixing the Oculus. Just
Right.
remove Facebook. It's
Yeah.
delete Facebook.
But beyond that, right? I mean, delete Facebook. That's totally fine, and only leave me with Messenger, which is the only part of Facebook that I actually use. But I guess that one improvement would just be that in the Guardian section of when you're setting up the Oculus Quest 2, like whenever you're like drawing the line of where your borders are and where like where there might be a wall or where you're leaving your safe zone, would probably be for you to also be able to add a vertical option. So that way, it would tell you if you're going to punch too high. And I guess in your case, that would be particularly helpful.
Hmm.
Something like that would be pretty nice to see in the future.
So all this discussion of VR, and I'm sure this has definitely come up before, but specifically with the Quest 2 being possibly playable outside of your house, this sort of just reminds me a lot of the Virtual Boy. You remember the Virtual Boy, right?
I do.
And how the Virtual Boy was technically supposed to be a portable system, even though it had a display stand built directly into the device. So it's like imagine that this little stand here was a part of the Quest, and that's your Virtual Boy, and they were trying to, parrot that as actually portable.
Hmm.
I mean, to be fair, it's about as accurate as saying that the Virtual Boy was actual VR. So,
Yeah.
at least they were consistent with how inconsistent they were with their marketing. But it's,
I mean,
um,
I would say that the definition of portable was so different back in the 80s and the 90s.
what are you talking about? You still had the Game Boy. I know the Game Gear was a bit of a beast, but even that was still about the size of like smaller than a Switch, actually.
I mean, you have that, but you have like cell phones that were actual bricks.
Were those really portable though?
Yeah, I mean, you were meant to actually travel around with them.
Like in a briefcase, certainly, right? You cannot fit that in your pockets.
Well, no, you couldn't actually fit that in your pocket, but I mean, I'm not sure how people used to wear them back in the day, but you definitely cannot fit that in your pockets, no matter how big you are.
I mean, maybe if you had those like the parachute pants from like MC Hammer or something like that, maybe you could fit a cell phone in there.
Even then, like people would see that and you would probably get mugged on site. So I can only imagine what traveling around with something like that would have been at the time, especially considering that, I mean, cell phones were such new tech that I'm sure that it must have been really expensive to get your hands on a cell phone back then, the same way that for a while getting your hands on a VR headset was pretty expensive. I mean, I do remember when the Oculus Rift first came out, it was 600. The HTC Vive, when that first came out, it was around 800. It was just not accessible to a lot of people in that same way, I guess, even though it is a bit of a weird comparison to me. But yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, man. We've definitely come a long way when it comes to technology and all those advancements. The problem is just, as we advance with technology, we also have to be concerned about possible privacy concerns. This is not the first time we've walked around with this particular rodeo. Obviously, home assistants have often come under fire. Your Alexas and your Siris and stuff like that.
Yeah.
With the possibility of them recording not even possibility, confirmed they are in fact recording,
Yes.
and they are always listening for the voice command. Where is that going? And you have that same concern when it comes to Facebook with its home assistant devices, and now the fact that that's being included into your virtual reality devices, that's a problem. Like if you bought, what was it? What was it called? The Facebook window, Facebook Shield. What was it? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like it was like an actual like screen on top of the Home Assistant part.
Mm-hmm.
It could also work as a camera or like a display.
Yeah.
Um,
I think you're talking about Google something.
no, Facebook had one too. I'm just
I know they also had one. But I think I know what kind of product you're talking about. Like it was essentially like a Google Home,
right.
but it just had a screen on it, and it did actually have a
Yeah.
camera built onto it, and it was meant more as like a casual device
I
to have
think
around for video chatting and that kind of
I
thing.
think the Facebook one was called Portal, like a Facebook Portal.
That part I don't
Was that
remember
it?
specifically, but I do think that Facebook did actually have their
They
own.
absolutely had one. I think they were actually the first one to have a full-on display on it. I think they beat Google to the punch on that.
Interesting.
But like you know what it is, because that it's obviously a concern that has been brewing for a while, and it always concerns me because it's like I would love to have this kind of technology, but then I don't really feel comfortable with it because of those privacy concerns.
Hmm.
I do have an Alexa in the house, which basically is just a weather machine for me. It is basically just a weather machine for me, but it's like
I mean, mine just turns on my lights, and
dig,
I'm perfectly content with that.
digging into the movies here. I always remembered when I was a kid, the movie I, Robot with Will Smith. I don't know if you've seen that one.
I do know of it. Yeah.
Like there's that one piece where like his partner in crime visits his house, and like she's trying to talk to the music player, like the speaker,
Hmm.
because all of the technology at that in that movie is voice commanded, and as a kid I'm thinking, holy crap, that is really cool. Like I really want to see that. I want a future like that. That's probably like 50 years from now. I said no. It turns out it was just like 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
And then you have the Will Smith character who his music player does not respond to voice commands because it's a manual, like a modern day for 2003 music player, and it's like he talks about it because he's paranoid about this stuff, and you're just like, Will, you're being weird about this, and then
I
turns
mean,
out
look
he
at
was
what
on the
we've
right
done.
side.
Yeah.
He was on the right side of it
Well, his
because,
character was at least. According to the script, he was on the right.
and it's just weird. Because it's just weird though, because like in iRobot, he's paranoid about this stuff because robots can be potentially violent, and you have the concern about that, sort of like a sort of Terminator, Skynet type deal, and not the possibility of privacy concerns like what we have in the real world. It's a much more boring dystopia there.
Yeah.
We're not at a point where we have robots. Boston Dynamics is trying the best that they can, but we don't have those super fighting robots yet. Instead, we just have our data is being sold, and that's a lot less fun.
Yeah. It is a lot less fun. And we definitely used to have this image of what the future was going to look like. In fact, I think that by now we probably expected to have flying cars, and that's something that never really happened. We do have self-driving cars, but even that is still
Work in progress.
yeah. Like I would say that it is very generous to call it a beta project. I I think it would be one step beneath that, if anything.
We're still in alpha.
Yeah.
I think it depends on the manufacturer. I know Tesla's smart. Tesla's self-driving has been pretty well
One of the
developed.
best, yeah.
But other places aren't, and it's not quite to a level where it's fully legal in all kinds of places. Like New York does not allow self-driving cars on the road,
And rightfully so.
that's just
Very
too much of a
rightfully so.
risk.
Yeah.
Um,
Too many people here, too many cars, and too
Right.
many stupid drivers. But
absolutely.
with that said,
So
the future is now.
yeah, and I also wanted to ask, just to bring us back to Oculus once
Yeah.
again. But like Facebook concern, huge issue. What are your thoughts on the recent reports and attempts of trying to crack Quest 2 to get past the Facebook requirement? Like I saw possible reports or some of that of people going as far as to offer $5,000 bounties to whoever can crack it first.
That's the only thing that I actually see Facebook trying to combat or trying to help with to an extent, and then try to claim that it is all for the sake of the consumer. Honestly, like this is your hardware. You bought this. I think that you should be able to customize it in whatever way you want. And there has actually been, other debates in regard to other consoles, like for example, Nintendo trying to crack down on people that tried to crack other
Switch.
Nintendo Switches.
Yeah.
That even if you were using a different account than the one that you had on your main Switch,
Mhm.
if there was some kind of connection between the two and Nintendo could tell, they would ban you on both to make sure that you
Right.
couldn't use the online functionality on either one. However, they wouldn't completely brick your consoles entirely. Like it's not like you just straight up cannot use your Switch at all if they
Exactly.
found you out.
It's still usable, whereas with the Oculus, it's no longer usable if your Facebook gets banned. Um,
Exactly. And that is a pretty big issue here.
and I imagine Facebook can also try and get around, try to crack down on this stuff. In
Pun
the same way
intended.
that Nintendo and other, manufacturers have in the past, it's like, oh, it's just to combat piracy. Because of course, if someone cracks their Quest 2, they can probably also pirate games on it.
Mm-hmm.
And piracy is a whole other subject for a whole other time.
Yeah.
But it seems like at the current moment, the primary focus for a lot of people is to be able to crack a Quest 2 so that way they don't have to use a Facebook account. So that way people who maybe don't want Facebook or have gotten their account
Mm-hmm.
banned for reasons completely unknown to everyone,
Yes.
they can actually use the device that they paid for. 'Cause that's the
Yes.
other thing too. No matter what, Facebook got the $300 to $400 from the purchase.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing to be losing out there is obviously the data from your Facebook account
Mm-hmm.
and possible software sales, which
Yeah.
I'm sure someone out there will say, well, that's a big deal, and that may be what it is, but it's not like they stole the Quest 2 and then they're trying to crack it on top of that.
I think that it would be a pretty big deal for them in particular because, again, like the Quest 2 is incredibly cheap. It's only $300. And a lot of people would agree that the reason why it costs this little is because they are siphoning your data through Facebook. So if somebody managed to crack it and make it so that Facebook has no say on how you use how your Quest 2, I would argue that in the long term, they will lose most of the money that they would have made out of that customer. Uh, again, in the long term.
At that point, you just sort of have to ask yourself, do you particularly as a person care about that? Like,
Me,
do you care that Facebook is losing money as rich as they are? That's just a whole other thing.
I don't. I don't care that they're losing money. I would want them to be as successful as they can be while still being consumer
Ethical,
friendly.
very ethical.
Yes,
That's the
and
thing.
ethical.
Like we can agree that this particular policy is very unethical. It's very morally.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So to that end, I just sort of want you to put a cap on. I just wanted to ask more or less, as good as this device is,
Mhm.
as astounding as it is, as much of a technological marvel it is to be able to use VR theoretically on the go, to such an extent to where you can play VR games like that. Given the mandatory Facebook sign-in and your opposition to that, can you, in the current moment, in good conscience, recommend the Quest 2 as a device, or would you recommend people go elsewhere?
Well, considering that I haven't personally experienced those issues with Facebook, like I do hate the fact that you have to link your account with Facebook.
Right.
But I haven't been banned yet,
Yet.
or at all. Who knows? I've had nothing but good experiences with this device, I would say. So I can still recommend it, but that is still one sample size.
Right. And of course there is that caveat where it's like, if you don't want Facebook, you have to go elsewhere no matter what.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that is true. And if you really are that concerned over Facebook and stuff, and that is a genuine concern, even if it may have sounded sarcastic coming from me,
Right.
um, I just wanted to say that if you are genuinely concerned about that, then I don't blame you at all for wanting to go with other headsets, because there are other options. They just cost more,
Significantly more.
significantly more, but those options at least are still there. So if you feel like saving up for a little longer or a lot longer is worth it in the long run, then it might really be worth it in the long run.
The
And
alternative, of course, is just waiting a little while longer because, I mean, we're still more or less in the early adopting phase of VR right now, aren't we?
yeah,
So, like, it's entirely
we still
possible.
are.
It's entirely possible that, like, if Valve comes out with an Index 2 in the next couple of years, that A, obviously it's going to be better, but B, it's entirely possible that could also be cheaper. Instead of being $1,000, maybe it comes down to maybe 800 or 750.
Yeah, I think that 800 is probably a more reasonable asking price. If let's say that they release an update within the next 3 to 4 years or so,
Right.
I don't see them doing that by 2021, though they could. But I think that maybe 2022, since the Valve did the Valve Index did already come out
And it's been
last year.
successful, right? I
Yeah,
mean, it seems like it is successful because they're constantly back ordered. So
yeah.
Valve is probably not going to abandon this the way Sony did with PSVR. They're probably also not going to abandon it the same way they did the Steam controller or
hmm
the Steam machines that they had.
Oh yes, yes, those beloved Steam machines that failed. Um, I unfortunately never really got my hands on a Steam machine. As much as I would still love one today, just for the sake of owning one. Those, I mean, it was something worth trying for a company. I think it was a colossal failure because we had consoles that were cheaper, and that still played games just fine. Uh, and ultimately, if you just want that TV experience, then I think that you are probably the kind of person that would be totally fine spending a lot less on the gadget that would allow you or that would bring you that experience overall.
There's also Steam Big Picture mode as well for people who want to be able to like hook up the PC or connect it in some way to a television.
Yeah, yeah, right. I actually use Big Picture all of the time on my PC, even still. Like just because it has much better embedded controller support than just regular Steam, and it's all just at a press of one button, which I think is awesome. But I do look forward to seeing where Valve goes actually with the index moving forward. And I would like to see more companies jumping in that aren't tied to Facebook or any other kinds of social media networks, like just to see how far they take it and how much competition they bring to Oculus and to Facebook overall.
Do you think could possibly join the VR market in the near future?
I would love it if Asus would. I
I was
mean,
I was thinking Asus too.
I think that Asus would. Razer would probably follow Asus, if anything. While they tend to be first on some things, they tend to be first on silly things.
Like
So,
more accessories, right?
yeah, like more so accessories and things like that. I do see Asus jumping in at some point, maybe even Acer. But I think that Asus is probably the next ones to come. I just think that if anything, they're probably more focused currently on the mobile market since they haven't really seen more gaming sensor phones actually.
Really?
Yeah. So I mean, I wish I could get my hands on an Asus phone right now, and who knows, in the future I could because I would love to review one of those on the channel because they do seem to be pretty impressive. I mean, we are talking 120 hertz screens,
Mm.
speakers positioned entirely differently than what you would normally find them. Uh, and you do still get like a bunch of other accessories made for those. And I believe that they're mostly meant for the enjoyment of like cloud gaming, since you have things like Google Stadia, Project X Cloud, uh, and uh, and GeForce Now
Mm.
on mobile devices and things like that. So right now they are just focused on that. Besides their laptop division and their graphics cards and things like that. But I think that if anybody is coming soon with a new VR headset that's not any of the companies that we've already mentioned, it would probably be Asus or Asus, depending on your persuasion.
I mean, I'm definitely looking forward to more competition in the VR space, especially because more competition would ultimately lead to not just further innovation in the actual like quality of the headsets, but also would probably lead to sort of arms race of like, who can offer the best value for a device. So, the prices would eventually go down due to other people in the market. And, maybe Asus has a VR headset for $700, and let's say Dell decides to get into the market and says, no, no, we're going to offer one for 600, and then they'll put out like an Alienware alternative for 1,000. So
Yes, I can see them doing that
that will
for
have
sure.
that one will have RGB attached to it. It's
Which is the one I mean, I would just have to buy it. I would just have to open up a new bank account just for that, like just a new credit card, like just so
Oh,
that I can get that headset, just because of the RGBs. And everybody knows that that is the only selling point to any piece of hardware.
right.
But that stupid joke aside, thanks to all of you for jumping in tonight. That's pretty much all of the time that we
Right?
had.
That's it. It's in the bag. Series
Yeah.
premiere.
Yeah, series premiere, episode 1. So welcome in. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode and let us know which topics you would like us to actually touch on in the future. And we would love to bring more of those as well because, I mean, hey, we make this content for you all. We would love to hear what you guys would like to know more about. And with that said, thank you so much for jumping in, and we will be seeing you on episode 2 next time. So have a good one and enjoy. Bye bye.
Take care. Good night. Travel well.